All we're saying is you can't carry a gun in town.
I have 2 guns, one for each of.
There are movies that entertain you, and then there are movies that quietly burrow into your soul and refuse to leave. Tombstone, the 1993 Western that turned a dusty Arizona legend into one of Hollywood's most beloved films, belongs firmly in that second category. Decades after its release, people still quote it at dinner tables, still debate its finest moments, and still feel that electric charge when Val Kilmer draws his way through Doc Holliday's most unforgettable lines. But here's the thing about Tombstone that most fans have never fully understood. The story behind the story is just as dramatic, just as emotional, and just as riveting as anything that happened at the OK Corral. And the man who has perhaps the most honest, most heartfelt things to say about all of it is Sam Elliott. Sam Elliott is the kind of actor who doesn't waste words. His voice alone carries the weight of 1,000 quiet sunsets, and when he finally opens up about something, you listen. For years, Elliott played Virgil Earp in Tombstone and let the performance speak for itself. He didn't dominate press tours or chase headlines. He stood in the shadow of Kurt Russell's commanding Wyatt and Val Kilmer's dazzling Doc Holliday, and he did his job with the steady dignity that has defined his entire career. But what he has since revealed about his experience making that film, about what was lost, what was fought for, and what the movie truly cost the people who made it, changes the way you see Tombstone entirely. To understand what Sam Elliott has shared, you first have to understand what Tombstone was supposed to be before it became what it is. The film originated with Kevin Jarre, a writer of genuine talent who had already proven himself with scripts that carried real emotional depth. Jarre didn't just write a Western shoot-'em-up. He constructed an elaborate, sweeping portrait of a town, a family, and a moment in American history. His screenplay was thick with character detail, subplots about family loyalty, scenes of quiet domestic life, and emotional connective tissue that gave every single member of the Earp family a full, breathing existence on the page. Sam Elliott read that script and was moved by it. He saw in Virgil Earp not a sidekick or a supporting player, but a man of genuine moral weight, the kind of figure whose quiet decency holds everything else together. That script is a large part of why he said yes to the role. Jarre was also set to direct the film himself, and in the early days of production, Elliott respected what he saw in the man's vision. Jarre cared about every detail, the way characters carried themselves, the historical accuracy of costumes and props, the rhythm of the dialogue he had written. But directing a large-scale Western with a massive ensemble cast and a tight studio deadline proved to be a mountain Jarre couldn't climb in the time allotted. His instincts as a filmmaker ran toward the classical and the deliberate, wide, sweeping shots that honored the tradition of the great Westerns that came before. The problem was that the studio had a Christmas release deadline bearing down on the production like a freight train, and the pace simply wasn't there. By the third day of filming, Elliott later admitted he could sense something was wrong. Jarre was struggling to capture the shots the film needed, and his reluctance to accept input from experienced crew members, including veteran cinematographer William Fraker, only deepened the tension. After roughly a month of filming, the decision was made to remove Jarre from the director's chair. It was an abrupt and painful moment for everyone involved. The cast had rallied around Jarre's vision and genuinely admired the world he had built on the page. Losing him felt, as Elliott described it, like losing the captain of the ship. There was real grief on that set. Not professional disappointment, but human sadness for a talented man whose dream had been taken from him mid-flight. George P. Cosmatos was brought in as the replacement director, arriving with barely enough time to orient himself before the cameras needed to roll again. What happened next is where the behind-the-scenes story of Tombstone becomes something truly remarkable. Kurt Russell, who was playing Wyatt Earp and had significant creative investment in the film's success, stepped quietly into an unofficial leadership role that would ultimately shape everything audiences saw on screen. Each night, Russell would work through the plans for the following day's shoot, preparing detailed shot lists and story guidance that he would hand to Cosmatos before the sun came up. He never took a directing credit. He never made a public announcement about what he was doing. He simply did the work because the film needed it and because he believed in it. Val Kilmer, who was sleeping on Russell's couch during parts of this period so they could maximize their planning time, later spoke about the sacrifice Russell made. The hours poured into something that would never carry his name in the credits. Sam Elliott watched all of this unfold and felt both grateful and heartbroken at the same time. Grateful because Russell's behind-the-scenes efforts genuinely helped hold the production together. Heartbroken because in the process of streamlining and saving the film, nearly 30 pages of Jar's original screenplay were cut. Russell and producer James Jacks made the decision to sharpen the film's focus, pulling the narrative tighter around the central relationship between Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. It was a defensible, creative choice, and in many ways it worked. But it came at a cost. The rich ensemble tapestry that Jar had woven, the subplots, the family scenes, the quieter emotional moments that gave every Earp brother a full human identity, was largely stripped away. For Elliott, this loss was deeply personal. Virgil Earp was no longer the complex, morally grounded figure he had signed on to play. The character was still present, still important to the story in structural terms, but so many of the scenes that would have revealed his interior life, his values, his relationships, and his humanity had simply been removed. Elliott later said, with characteristic plainness, that if he had known how much of Virgil's story would be cut from the final film, he might not have taken a role. That is not a trivial statement from a man who does not speak carelessly. It reflects a genuine sense of what was lost, not just for his performance, but for the film's emotional ambition. The rest of the cast felt similar frustrations. Michael Biehn, who played the menacing Johnny Ringo, noted that Jar's original conception had been a true ensemble piece, painting the whole community of Tombstone with equal care. Suddenly, that ensemble had been narrowed down to 2 lead performances, with everyone else serving the story of Kurt and Val. Powers Booth and Bill Paxton, both skilled and committed actors who had also been drawn to Jar's original vision, found their roles significantly diminished. There was a phrase that circulated quietly among the cast. They called the reworked version the Kurt and Val show. It wasn't said entirely without affection, because both Russell and Kilmer were brilliant in their roles, but it carried the sting of real disappointment. What makes Sam Elliott's experience especially poignant is how he responded to all of this. He didn't leave. He didn't publicly complain. He didn't give bitter interviews while the film was still being made. Instead, he found small, quiet ways to fight for his character within the constraints he was given. He and some of his fellow cast members would occasionally slip their favorite lines back into scenes during takes. Subtle acts of creative resistance that preserved at least some of the flavor of what Jar had originally written. Elliott held onto the essence of Virgil even when the script around that essence had been hollowed out, because that was what the role deserved and what the story needed, even if the film itself didn't fully realize it. There's a scene in Tombstone that many viewers have never paid close attention to, but which Sam Elliott has pointed to as key to understanding who Virgil Earp really is. Just before the violence at the OK Corral erupts, Virgil pulls a child out of the path of danger. It is a small moment, easy to miss in the rush of the film's momentum, but it says everything. Virgil is not there for glory or revenge. He is there because someone has to protect the people who cannot protect themselves. That sense of duty, of reluctant but unwavering responsibility, is the core of Elliott's performance throughout the entire film. And it is the quality that Jar's original script gave so much more space to breathe and expand. Earlier in the film, Virgil chastises his brothers for getting drawn back into the world of violence they had tried to leave behind. He understands what it costs to live that life, and he does not celebrate it. He is the moral voice of the Earp family. Not the most charismatic, not the most exciting, but the most grounded. Elliott played that role with enormous care, using his voice, his posture, and the measured patience of his delivery to create a character who carries the weight of the story even when the camera is pointed elsewhere. Critics and film scholars who have revisited Tombstone in the years since its release have increasingly recognized this contribution, noting that Elliott's quiet presence provides an emotional anchor that keeps the more explosive performances of Russell and Kilmer connected to something real and human. The production also faced remarkable external pressures that most fans know nothing about. When Tombstone was gearing up for release, it was entering the marketplace in direct competition with Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp, a rival film telling the same historical story. Costner had actually been approached about appearing in Tombstone before choosing to pursue his own version, and the competition between the two productions became genuinely fierce. According to accounts from people involved in the production, Costner used his considerable influence in Hollywood to discourage studios from distributing Tombstone, effectively trying to squeeze it out of the market before it could reach audiences. He reportedly cornered much of the available Western costume inventory in Hollywood, forcing Tombstone's wardrobe team to source period-appropriate clothing from Europe, which, in a twist of historical irony, turned out to be entirely authentic, since the wealthier residents of the real Tombstone had often ordered their fine clothing from European tailors. In the end, Disney's Buena Vista distribution arm held firm and released Tombstone on Christmas Eve 1993. The film, made for around $25 million, went on to earn more than $76 million worldwide. Costner's Wyatt Earp, released 6 months later with a much larger budget and a nearly 3-hour running time, failed to connect with audiences and barely recovered its production costs. The contrast was striking and somewhat poetic. Tombstone, the film that had nearly collapsed in production, that had lost its original director, that had been trimmed and reshaped under impossible pressure, turned out to be the one that endured. Sam Elliott has reflected on all of this with the kind of perspective that only time and distance can provide. He is proud of the film. He is proud of what the cast and crew accomplished under circumstances that could have, and by any reasonable measure, should have, resulted in a disaster. He is proud of what he gave to Virgil Earp, even knowing that so much of what he had prepared to